Hello everyone, it's Silver. This is Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes. So this is a big JRPG, like really big in terms of just overall size and gameplay hours and all that stuff. In every respect, it's just huge. I've been completely impressed after playing through most of it so far by just how much it keeps going and keeps expanding, and there's more world maps and more stuff to do. But to get started, what exactly is it? Well, I did mention it's a JRPG, but it's not just any JRPG. This is actually directed by Yoshitaka Murayama, who unfortunately did pass away in February of this year, so this is his final project. But he was the creator of the Suikoden series, a very good older series of PlayStation 2 JRPGs that were really unique for a lot of reasons, but one of which being their huge number of playable characters. And I believe in this studio that he created to help create this game, they also got one of the other sort of directors of the later Suikoden games as well. So like the whole team basically was here in terms of its main brains that helped to create it. And what I was expecting when I went into this was a love letter to Suikoden. And it definitely is that to a certain extent. It is very much like a spiritual successor to their style of JRPG, but this is also just a love letter to JRPG history in general, in a very big way. Ow! So the setup for this game is pretty interesting. You start the game as Noah, and the setup will sound kind of familiar. This is probably a plot you've seen in JRPGs before, but the way it's done here is quite a bit different from how I'm used to seeing it. So at first, this world is basically in the beginnings of like a Magitech industrial revolution, effectively. You know, this is sort of like the beginning of Final Fantasy VI, but what happened before that, you know, before Magitech got so common, so popular. And there is an empire, and the empire in this world is not your classic evil JRPG empire, but instead it's a sort of mixed place where there's a history of some really awful attitudes towards some of the other races that are in this world and stuff, but also a lot of people that feel that the Empire has the ability to sort of create a better world for everyone, and, you know, using their size as a way to develop and expand these technologies into the rest of the world, and they don't actually feel the way that some of the other Imperials do. They're not quite so stuck up. So it's a little bit more complicated than just Empire bad, and there's actually several people in the Empire that will join you on your quest to defeat the rest of the Empire because of some really nasty things that happen. Now, of course, I'm not going to be explaining any huge plot points here or showing any major cutscenes or anything like that in the background. I do not want to spoil the story for people, so you don't have to worry about that. But basically, someone in the Empire uses a false pretense that they manufactured themselves to invade other parts of the world and actually start taking them over, basically using the people of the region as fuel for experiments, because everyone wants this technology to come to pass, but some people don't care about the cost of what might happen if they do. So they're willing to experiment on people and things in order to have this happen faster. But the interesting thing about it is it's actually not the Emperor that's doing this. It's actually just a Dukes. So it's someone that has a lot of power in the Empire, but it's not the Emperor himself. And in fact, it seems the Emperor doesn't really even know about this particular faction being effectively traitorous to the rest of the Empire. And so the early parts of the game are about the Dukes trying to expand his reach into the rest of the Empire and get more people on his side. So I find that to be a really interesting beginning to a story where in a lot of JRPGs the Empire is just evil, they're just bad through and through, but in this case they're not really, and it takes a while for public opinion to be swayed towards this person's side, and they have to do a lot of manipulation and scheming and stuff to actually make it happen. But you are contracted by the Countess Groom, the area that was invaded under false pretenses, to sort of form a resistance army, because you see what's happening and what this Dukes is about to do. You're pretty much the only one on the front lines that actually knows what he's about to do, so it becomes your job, whether you like it or not, to actually form up, create an alliance that can rebel against him and try and knock the Empire back on track. And this is where the whole 100 Heroes thing comes into play. So you may think it's called that, but are there actually 100 characters that you can play? Yes, yes, there are. There are actually a little bit over 100 characters that you can recruit. So you'll have quite the job to actually go around the world and find all these people. And as you would expect for this genre, many of them are not necessarily secret, but optional. There are lots and lots of characters that you don't have to get, so you are rewarded for doing all the side quests and exploring all the places. There are entire optional dungeons and stuff that you can find. In fact, there are entire optional towns that you can explore too, that will help you find some characters that you may otherwise have missed. The party mechanics are pretty cool. In this game, you have a pretty large party with you at all times. You've got 6 people in combat, at any given time, 3 in the front, 3 in the back, and then you've got a support character. And there are some characters you can recruit that are only supports. They can't be put into combat, and there are others that actually can. They can be either support or combat. And at first you might think that the decision of who to put in the front and who to put in the back is mostly based on defense and HP, and that definitely is part of it, but also every character's weapon has a range, either short, medium, or long. And if you have a short-range character, they have to be in the front. They can't attack from the back at all. Medium characters can attack from the back, and then long-range, I believe, can attack all of the enemy from wherever without penalty. Support characters are a pretty big deal, by the way. Don't ignore that support slot. A lot of them are really, really useful. They can be anything from calling in a rain of arrows before combat starts so that the enemies start pre-damaged, to doubling your movement speed or making your bags be able to hold more stuff so you can bring like way too many potions, or even some smaller stuff like doubling the money that you get from combat and stuff, which is actually a pretty huge deal early on because there are some big money sinks in this game, which I'll get onto later. It uses a dual resource system where characters have something called MP and SP. MP works pretty much like you would think. It is your magic points. You use it for spells, and it does not regenerate at all. So it's a very important resource in dungeon runs and stuff because you've got to make it last. And I've noticed that you can't really buy MP restoring items very much. They're pretty rare to find, so it's not like you can go to the city potion shop and buy some turbo ethers or whatever. They're not there, so you've got to be careful about how much MP you're using. And then SP is something that every character gains just by doing actions, especially attacking with their basic attacks, and you spend these on various rune skills. So all of your characters have something called a rune lens, which is this universe's version of like a sort of Magitech spellcasting device. It's a lens that you socket runes into, and the runes can be anything from passive effects that increase your stats to entire elemental runes that give you access to several new spells, or indeed specific attacks with your weapon, and this is what the SP is for. A lot of characters will have unique runes that they'll unlock by leveling, so you can't actually fill all the slots in a character's rune lens at first. At every certain number of levels they'll unlock a new slot. It's different for each character. But some of these slots will start empty, so you can plop whatever rune you want in there that fits the type. Runes have a number of diamond symbols next to them, and the rune slots also have those diamond symbols, so if you have like a 3 capacity slot, you can only slot in a 3 cost rune or less. But a lot of these slots will already have runes when they're revealed, and these will be new sort of signature attacks for that character. You can also usually replace these with other things if you want to, but oftentimes they are really good, and since they're unique to those characters, many times they're good to keep on them because they help to, diversify what each character can do. It's sort of their signature thing. There are also hero combos. There are specific characters that if you have them in your party, they can act together in team attacks. Hero combos are super powerful, but they require all of the participants to have a certain number of SP to use at once. It burns every character's SP at the same time. And some hero combos are 2 characters and some are 3. So you can actually involve quite a bit of your party in these at one time, but it does take the turns of everyone involved in it at once. So it's good that they're very powerful. One little touch that I found kind of interesting, just because it's not quite usual for a JRPG. In most JRPGs, you don't know how much health an enemy has, unless you have some sort of scan or Libra style ability that shows you how much HP they have left. And this game is no different. It doesn't tell you exactly, but the enemies' names in the top left of the screen when you're in combat will actually change color to display how much health they have left in a very rough sense. So they'll go from white to yellow to red when they're at critical HP. So this even works on bosses, by the way, so you can actually see that you are having an effect. Some bosses take a while to take down. In fact, the boss fights in general in this game are really, really good as far as JRPG bosses go. They are usually multiple phases and have some unique mechanics to them oftentimes. They'll have what's called a gimmick. The game actually calls it a gimmick, and some bosses will just have these. There'll be a cannon that you can fire every couple of turns, or a book that acts as a big whack-a-mole that hits this crazy demon mole thing that, as long as you choose the right side of the arena, that it's going to appear on. Or maybe the boss has a crazy arena sweeping attack that does a crap load of damage, but if you see who it's going to hit and put them into cover, because some cover appears at the right time, then they'll not take any damage at all. There's just all sorts of stuff that makes the boss fights in this game really involved and very cool. There's some super memorable fights that I've seen so far, including some optional bosses that have been really challenging, by the way. So yeah, the boss fights are a high point of the combat for sure. They're relatively long fights, usually like a good 15 to 20 minutes oftentimes it feels like, but and I've definitely failed failed at several of them and had to restart them a couple times, but they are all doable so far. I have found this game overall to be relatively difficult, but not like, extremely hard or anything, just challenging. It's not afraid to throw some pretty significant odds at you sometimes, like the difficult Magitech research facility that you can complete that has some pretty brutal enemies in it, and when you complete the facility you're probably tired out by then, but it then makes you fight 4 bosses back to back with no rest in between them until you can actually get back to a town and rest afterwards. And luckily the first 3 are pretty simple, but the 4th one is much more difficult. So the runes offer a lot of character progression, but there's also of course gear. Every character has a head and body slot that they can wear armor in, as well as a shield slot for some characters and an accessory slot for everyone. There are loads of accessories in this game that do all kinds of useful things, especially the ones that like heavily increase specific stats or make you immune to certain status ailments. Those are always nice to have. There are even some for elemental resistances and things as well. You'll find that there's a lot of different helmets and body armor pieces. There are several different sort of tiers of the armor that different kinds of characters can have. That only certain characters can equip this super crazy heavy plate armor, but a lot more characters can equip things like robes and stuff like that. So you've got to sort of look at what's best for everyone and see what you can find, and you'll see that there's a pretty huge variety in armor and stuff. The shield system is pretty interesting. It makes tanky characters pretty significant. You'll see this little shield symbol with a letter inside of it, all the way from like, I think E, D or E, all the way up to S. And S being the best, of course, and it just drastically reduces the damage that character takes, like physical damage at least. But unless it's grapple damage, in which case it goes right through shields. But this shield will be decreased over time if they take like impact damage, so like blunt objects and stuff will sort of break the shield over time. And then once it's broken, everyone will do normal damage to them, but while the shield is up, they're super tanky. Enemies can have this as well as some of your characters. Now you'll notice that of all the various traditional JRPG things you're going to be finding and equipping your characters with, one of them is not weapons. That is because there are no weapon shops in this game. You do not buy weapons for characters. Instead, every character has their sort of signature weapon that they come with by default. And instead of buying new ones, you upgrade the one they already have. You can go to various smiths around the world and spend an increasing amount of money to upgrade their weapon through various tiers. And as you continue to upgrade it, it'll get new names and sort of evolve and stuff, which is pretty cool. So this means that you are still improving the character's weapons, just not in the way that you would normally think for a JRPG. You're not finding or buying new ones, but rather crafting up the ones they already have. And also different smiths in different towns have a different maximum level that they can upgrade your weapons to, so you can't get the same quality of upgrades from everyone. You've got to keep progressing through the story and finding new towns and stuff in order to actually get to the higher tiers of upgrade. And this is one of those money sinks I mentioned earlier, because it is very expensive to keep all of your party's weapons in top shape. If you want to keep them all upgraded to the maximum that you can, then you're talking at least 6 characters worth of weapons that can cost like, tens of thousands for each character to keep upgrading them. So it is definitely one of those things that you want to have a lot of money in the bank for. Because you have a lot of characters, the game also does a good job of encouraging you to change up your party frequently. There will be several times in the story where you have to take certain characters with you, and then the rest of the slots are open for you to choose whoever you want based on who you've recruited so far. The cool thing about this is there are 3 slots at the back of your party sort of reserves that allow you to put characters, only the characters that you need for the story. You can't put anyone else in there, but you can put the required characters for that moment in there. This means that you can meet the requirement while taking someone else if you want to. Another thing the game does to encourage you to swap around a lot is there will be several story moments where you have multiple teams, so you actually have to make multiple different parties worth of characters in order to actually go and do simultaneous objectives. There's also something that I noticed. This game is clearly going for a way to make the game less grindy, basically. In fact, I don't think the game is grindy at all. I haven't noticed any enforced grinding of any kind, but the big deciding factor for this is characters who are of a lower level than everyone else get huge amounts of bonus experience when you bring them on a combat. You've got like a party of level 40 characters with one level 20 character that you want to level up. Well, you defeat some enemies appropriate for the level 40s and they'll get like 300 or 400 XP, but then your level 20 character will get like 5,000 XP and then get like several levels every time you battle with them. So this means that you don't have to grind, because even characters that are significantly lower level will catch up very quickly if you bring them along. And I have to imagine that this huge amount of bonus experience was deliberately done to make the game not grindy because of the huge number of characters that you could potentially be raising up. It does have the opportunity to become extremely grindy if you're not careful, so making it work this way I think is a really good call. The voice acting so far, in my opinion, has been really good, and I'm impressed by the sheer amount of it. Like, every one of your recruitable characters has voice acting. There are even scenes where some of your characters will talk and other characters will respond to them, but you didn't actually have to bring that character to that scene. You could have brought someone else, which means they went through the trouble of recording a whole bunch of optional dialogue that a lot of people won't even see because they might have a different party composition to you. Even support characters that don't take part in battle still have dialogue in important story scenes and things, so you'll be surprised by just how many permutations of parties the game recognizes and actually gives specific dialogue across the scenes. I especially like several of the voice actors, but Noah's voice actor I think does a really good job because he's kind of chill most of the time. He's not like your super fiery anime protagonist kind of guy, he's just really relaxed most of the time, but he does angry really well. His voice actor is really good at sounding like exasperated and just sort of overwhelmed and angry at certain things when the time comes for that to be part of the story. So I think he pulls off like sudden emotion really well. There's also a huge number of different accents on display here. There are a lot of voice actors, so there's a lot of opportunity to get people from around the world, and they did. You'll hear all kinds of different accents in this game. I'm pretty sure I've heard like an Australian person talking to a Welsh person, talking to a Scottish person, all in the same scene.
Crikey!
So the huge wealth of diversity for the characters that you can recruit and for their voice actors and how they've managed to get a whole bunch of different accents and stuff represented in the game very accurately is super cool. Story-wise, without spoiling anything, I think the story so far has been pretty enthralling. I've been really impressed with how it's played out. There have been some really cool twists and turns, things I didn't expect, interesting new characters showing up at certain times to mix things around, and some other surprises that, of course, I'm not going to talk about, but the fact that the story has had this many twists and turns so far and has remained very coherent and very understandable is pretty impressive. I think one of the big criticisms of JRPG stories that people like to make is that the scale goes totally crazy and they become kind of hard to follow and convoluted. This story does not do that at all. The scale is very reasonable. It's, you're fighting against an empire, you're a plucky resistance, and you're trying to get some other people in the world on your side. It's not this cosmic scale story where you go and kill like horrible demons from beyond space and time or anything like that. It's all very authentic. It's a somewhat tragic, believable war story that is a fantasy war story, but still recognizable in all of its facets to what we've seen in, similar concepts before. So far, from what I've seen, the story is very well executed, and it has kept me interested the whole time. There hasn't been a single scene where I've felt bored, or where I've sort of known exactly what was going to happen, and it all played out exactly like I thought, and no, that hasn't really been a problem. In this case, it helps that there's so many characters, because this means there's a lot of moving parts, so you can make these scenes a lot more complex. You can have some actual political intrigue and some believable sort of posturing from nobles and dukes and stuff and have it all make sense. You'll even be consorting with multiple different kings and leaders of huge factions and stuff, and they all have very different personalities and are not sort of cookie-cutter fantasy tropes at all. They're all pretty different. I mean, come on, this is the world with the Shi'arks. The Shi'arks are shark people. They look like sharks, but they're people. And they are terrified of water for some reason. They are a desert-dwelling people, because of course they are, and they feel that water will dissolve their bones if they get into water, and that there's some sort of ancient prophecy where they used to exist in an ocean, but none of them believe it. Oh, and also they all like to race, and they talk like pirates, and they all have a sort of code of honor in relation to all of that, and are very stalwart allies once you actually get on their side. Early on in the game, you'll stumble across a ruined castle, and you'll actually make this castle the HQ of your alliance. And part of the game, an important part of it, is upgrading this castle to actually make it a better home for your alliance. So you have this big list of upgrades that you can purchase. You can find all sorts of resources out in the world, and these are not for a crafting system, these are for upgrading your castle. Whenever you bring these resources back, one of your characters will automatically put them into sort of a treasury for you. And you can also do some other stuff back at your castle, like heal everyone up, or change your party around, teleport all over the place once you get fast travel unlocked from the dubious teleport girl that's definitely going to throw your entire army into like the 5th dimension at some point. There's a hot spring run by a capybara man that you can relax in. It gives you some regeneration for a few battles. And there's several other things you can do at your HQ, but yeah, you can also upgrade it with all sorts of things. And this is a lot of where the recruiting is going to come into play, because there are lots of buildings that you can only build once you've recruited a specific character to actually staff them. So you can find like this item shop owner, basically that is like a traveling merchant that wants to settle down and be more of a not traveling merchant. And once you actually convince him and get him what he needs, then he'll open up an item shop in your town, and you can upgrade the item shop to have better and better stuff at it and stuff like that. You can find like hunters and miners that are of course dwarves, of course, and some like lumber cutting people to help give you some more building materials and stuff. And you can find even some other people like appraisers, because there are items in this game that you'll get from enemies in chests sometimes that are unidentified, and you have to bring them to an appraiser and pay a small fee, but it will be revealed what it's actually worth. And usually these are items that are only for selling, and they're worth like a lot of money, so you want to find them, although you do have to find a specific one in order to actually recruit the appraiser in the first place. There's even a diviner that allows you to seek out new allies. So if you're having trouble finding out what characters are where, the game actually tracks them, and you can pay the diviner a small fee, and he'll tell you what city or where someone is at and what they're seeking, so that you can go and get some new allies that way, so that you don't feel lost about where to go next or who is where. And there are, of course, your classic JRPG minigames for you to find and do. Some of these are so involved that they actually involve entirely new characters you can recruit and even have in battle, and do all sorts of stuff that lasts for the whole game. So you've got stuff like fishing, or Begomo, which is sort of like Beyblades. Believe it or not, you can actually collect these tops and battle them with other people and get new characters and stuff that way. So there's a lot here. This is a massive game, and if you're a fan of JRPGs, or you've been historically a fan of them but maybe not a fan of recent ones or something like that, this is such a love letter to the classics of the genre that it almost hurts. And I do think it's pretty cool that this is a Kickstarter success that met its goal in like 3 hours or something ridiculous like that. And it's so good, you know, because there were a couple of Kickstarter successes here and there for a while that kind of made people question whether or not it was a good idea anymore. But this, I think, will help to put that worry to rest entirely, because this is such a fantastic RPG that I think everyone will be happy when they actually get their hands on it. And of course, it is very sad that the creator of this beloved series actually did pass away, but I think of all of the projects to have as your final hurrah for the world, the sort of end of your legacy, the thing that's going to help people remember you in the modern day, this is an excellent example of that. You know, this is something that reaches all the way back to like Suikoden 1 era, that sort of PlayStation 2 JRPG sort of feel, those vibes, but manages to modernize all of it in a way that keeps all of the heart intact, the things that people loved. You know, that thing that games like this do where you enter a new town or a new dungeon and it sweeps the camera slowly through the area and then shows the title of the area at the bottom of the screen or the top of the screen or whatever. I love that. I love it when games do that, and this game does that, and it feels exactly like it should. And the towns have that classic JRPG town ambience where, you know, you sort of know where everything is. You can walk around and find new characters and find out where all the shops are, so every time you get to a new town you're excited to see what they have that the last one didn't, and they all have sort of nice themes and cool aesthetic themes and stuff. So yeah, it is a JRPG in the classic sense, and it does so much to sort of remind us where the genre came from, I think, but also it doesn't feel that it's stuck in the past in its mechanics or its storytelling, and in fact it feels very modern in those respects. So if you're looking for a long-form RPG to play, or if you're looking for just a JRPG that you haven't maybe played one in a while, this is definitely recommended. This is highly recommended from me, and is already out of the gate probably going to be one of the best in its genre this year, I think. So 100% recommended, even at full price. It is very much worth it. It's a huge game, and if you like the genre, then you'll really enjoy it. And if maybe you're not a JRPG fan because of some things you've heard about the genre, then I would suggest maybe giving this a look anyway, because it does so many things to sort of put some of those worries to rest mechanically and make the game feel a bit more modern. So yeah, I'll put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page for Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.